When I was 15, I had this crazy day I want to share. I was really into running back then and lived in a suburban town surrounded by big fields of farmland. Not the never-ending wheat fields, more like smaller ones with tomatoes and strawberries. Kind of like strawberry fields, but not huge. I loved running on the dirt at the edges of those fields because it was much easier on my legs than running on the pavement. I used to train for half marathons, which are like 13 miles, pretty nuts, huh? But on that day, I was just planning to go for a relaxed 6-mile run. I told my mom about it, and she suggested, why not walk halfway and meet us at the dog park, which is about 3 miles from home. This was back when not everyone had smartphones. So I got a walkie-talkie that my dad always used, and my mom took the other one. These walkie-talkies had a longer range than the ones my brothers and I played with as kids, but they probably wouldn't work from 3 miles away. But it was better to be safe than sorry. I went for a run, first on the sidewalk, and then through some fields. The fields had short plants, maybe lettuce. I ran on the dirt path with the road on my left. I had to go south and then turn right onto a smaller road to reach the dog park. While I was on the dirt path, my parents drove by, acting silly. They honked, waved, and yelled at me. I waved back and then turned onto the smaller road. The street was super quiet, not many cars around. I was thinking about how far the houses were if I needed help. Suddenly, I heard a car, but it didn't pass like the others. Slowed down, staying right behind me. I got really alert, realizing I might have chosen a bad path. Now there's no one around to help, and the car is speeding up, getting right next to me. I looked over and saw a man in his middle years with dark hair. He seemed pretty average, but something about him gave me a creepy feeling. He leaned in and asked politely,
"Hello, where are you headed? Need a ride?"
I felt really scared, even though nothing had happened yet. My instincts were telling me that something was not right. So, I quickly jumped over a ditch, thinking it would be tougher for his car to follow if I had to run across the field to the nearby houses. But this really makes him angry. He speeds up, getting closer to the ditch in front of me. Then, he says something in a really scary and evil voice.
"You shouldn't be out here by yourself. Something bad could happen, and nobody would know."
He parks his car, takes off his seatbelt. That's when I remember the walkie-talkie. The sound on the phone is fuzzy because I'm far away. I lower the volume and tell my dad, "Hey, I see your car. I'm near the red Buick. Can you see me?" No cars were coming from where my parents were, and there was no one behind us when I started talking. But suddenly, a car appears on the road. The driver notices it, looks at me, and drives away really quickly, leaving skid marks. I ran faster than I ever have before. I kept looking behind me every few seconds, worried that someone might be waiting for me at every intersection I had to cross. I was shaking and scared, but also relieved when I finally reached the dog park. I told my parents everything, and my mom called the police. They listened to my story, but they said it would only be useful if something bad happened to someone else. When I'm talking to the cop about what happened, I'm super upset. Even before I mention the car, he asks if it was a red Buick. I'm like, "Yeah, how did you guess?" He doesn't explain, but it makes me feel like I just dodged a really bad situation. So I ask about the red Buick, and it turns out there have been reports about a creepy guy in a red Buick trying to approach people. They haven't caught him yet, and I basically just avoided becoming another victim. The police officer received a message on his radio while we were chatting, and his expression turned really serious. He said, "We just heard about a red Buick nearby that fits the description." I got super nervous. The cop told my parents to take me home, and he rushed away, explaining that they had to investigate the situation. At my house, my parents are really concerned and keep asking if I'm okay. I'm still trying to understand everything that happened, you know. But here's the surprising part. Later that day, the police call us. They found the person, and he had some weird things in his car, like ropes and duct tape. It's not a joke. The police tell my parents that I might have just escaped from something really, really bad. I thought everything was done and safe. The person causing trouble was caught, so I went back to my usual routine of running. I changed my route to avoid the place where the problem happened. But a few weeks later, while I was running, I saw someone behind me. It turned out to be another runner, like me, just out for some exercise. At first, I got a little nervous, thinking something might be wrong, but then I realized I was just being overly worried. We begin talking, and he seems nice. It turns out he lives close by, and we start jogging together for a bit. It feels great to have company, you know? But then he proposes taking a quicker path through some woods. I start feeling uneasy, remembering a similar situation before. I make up an excuse saying I need to stick to my usual route and I quickly leave. This person keeps insisting that taking a shortcut is better and quicker. I trust my feelings, so I say no, I have to go. Maybe another time. I start running faster, my heart beating fast. When I look back, I see him still there, just watching me run away. I don't know what his problem is, but I don't want to take any risks. I come home and share with my parents about the strange jogger I encountered. We decide to tell the police just to be safe. They take it seriously because of past incidents. The surprising thing is that danger can come from unexpected sources. It's not always the obvious creepy person in the red car. Sometimes it's someone who seems nice, but your instincts tell you something is not right. Here's what happened during a normal run that turned into a really exciting adventure. I figured out that it's important to listen to my gut feelings, stay focused, and be ready for unexpected surprises in life. So if you ever feel something strange while running, pay attention to it. It could help you avoid a surprise you didn't expect. The summer after I completed middle school, my mom helped me get a part-time job at a small restaurant called Sunshine Bites, not far from our home. The pay wasn't huge, but I was saving every penny for one thing, buying a used bike before the end of summer. I started being really careful with money, like it was my new way of life. I thought about every single penny before spending it. But there was a problem. When my work shifts ended late at night, I had to decide whether to spend a lot of my money on a taxi or just run home in the dark. It was a tough choice. Back then, I wasn't really into sports, but I needed to save money. So I decided to dust off my old sports gear and started running home a few times a week. It was tough at first, and sometimes I got so tired that I had to take a cab. However, as time went on, I got stronger and felt a happy feeling with each step I took. I used to time my runs very carefully with a Casio stopwatch. It was like a reliable friend to me. Sometimes I turned my runs into a game, trying to beat my previous records. My route went through a big park in the middle. The first few nighttime runs through the park felt spooky. Before going in, I would take out one headphone to be cautious about what I might encounter. One night, while I was getting used to the park and feeling more comfortable, I suddenly heard a really scary scream. It made me feel really scared, especially since I was only a third of the way into my walk. I had one headphone out, so I couldn't tell where the scream was coming from, which made it even scarier. I stopped, took out the other headphone, and stood under a streetlight that was flickering, feeling really uneasy and still. Telling myself it was likely just a nighttime animal, maybe a fox making spooky sounds, I gathered my courage to continue jogging. But things didn't go as expected. The same scary scream echoed through the night again. This time, I could tell where it was coming from. It was a young voice, definitely a child's. Fear took hold of me, and I felt torn inside. I suddenly felt like I had a strange duty. It was as if the universe was asking me, am I a good person? Even though I was scared, I realized I couldn't be a bad person. So, nervously, I stepped away from the well-lit path into the dark, trying to see what was around me by squinting my eyes. Standing under the streetlights erased my ability to see in the dark, but then I heard a scream nearby, making me move ahead. My heart raced, and as I looked around, I found a young child, around 9 or 10 years old, sitting under a tree in the dark, crying. Seeing that, I became determined to help. I walked up carefully, trying not to frighten the child who seemed scared. When I asked about his parents, he couldn't speak and used gestures I couldn't understand. I checked for any visible injuries but didn't find any. Still, I was worried about injuries on the inside. Once the child felt a bit better and could talk, I started asking questions to figure out what happened to his parents. I asked the boy about his dad first, but he didn't know where he was. Then I brought up his mom and he started crying. He admitted, "I don't have a mom anymore. In that moment, I hoped it was just a misunderstanding or a fight with his mom. Maybe he ran away and was scared in the park. I tried to make him feel better by telling him not to worry. I promised we would figure out how to get him back home, but he was still very upset. I kept encouraging him until he calmed down enough for me to ask an important question. Did he know where he lived? Luckily, he did. So, holding hands, we started the journey to take him back home. I got a weird feeling when the kid took me to his house. It was strange because he wasn't lost. As we got closer to his front door, I felt really uneasy. The door was wide open at 2 a.m., and it felt kind of scary. It wasn't like helping a lost kid at the store. I could sense something unknown and frightening inside that house. Quickly, I took the child to a neighbor's house to stay safe. Even though the person on the phone said not to, I called 911 and told them I was worried something bad was happening at the child's home. The neighbor heard us talking and came out with a weapon, ready to check things out. I tried to stop him, but he wanted me to tell the police if they came while he was still there. In a strange and surprising turn of events, the neighbor went inside the house with weapons like a hero in a movie. Time passed, and when he came back out, his face showed that something really scary had happened. There were 2 dead bodies inside. That's when I realized that when the child said, "I don't have a mommy anymore," he wasn't joking. He had seen something really, really bad. The police came and asked me what happened, but they got more interested in my neighbor who went into the crime scene. Meanwhile, I went back home feeling a mix of shock and tiredness. I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about the child and the scary things he might have seen. A few days later, the news shared the sad story, but I decided not to talk about my part in it. Many years have gone by since that night, and I often think about the kid I found. He's probably around the age I was back then. I hope he's managed to overcome the tough times and create a good life for himself. But if things happen the way I'm afraid they did, if he saw his mom suffer a terrible fate from her boyfriend before he hurt himself, it's hard to imagine any child coming out of such a horrible experience without being deeply affected. Before I continue to the next story, if you are interested in earning from YouTube without showing your face, or without making videos by yourself using artificial intelligence, like the video that you are watching right now, then I have a special free training for you. Check the first link in the description below to get instant access. A few months ago, when everyone had to stay home because of quarantine, I started spending more time in my comfy home in a quiet neighborhood. Since the gym was closed, I couldn't go there like before. Instead, I started going for runs around my block. It turned out to be okay, and the new view was nice for a change. Living alone in a calm neighborhood was nice, but when everything shut down, I began checking out nearby areas while I went for my runs. There's a cool loop in a park near my house that takes me right back home, and I sometimes use it to make my routine more interesting. One day, while I was halfway through my run, I saw a guy in his early 30s walking around the park. At first, I thought he was just watching his child play at the playground, which happens a lot in our neighborhood. But as I got closer, I saw he didn't have a kid with him. Seemed strange, a grown-up man alone at the playground. She tried to get my attention by calling out, but I had my headphones on and acted like I couldn't hear him. I ignored him and kept running, thinking maybe he lived close by. I was surprised when he started following me. I thought maybe he was a neighbor, so I went home. But when I looked out the window, after entering my house, I saw him going back to the park. It was weird because he didn't live nearby. He followed me just to see where I lived. After the strange meeting, I just continued with my day, not thinking much about the man I met in the park, but things got weird later that night. While I was lying in bed, almost asleep, I saw car lights going back and forth outside my window. It caught my attention because my neighborhood is usually quiet. I couldn't resist being curious about what was going on. I woke up and looked out my window. I saw a car parked in front of my mailbox. The driver's side door opened, and it was the same guy I saw at the park. I was scared, so I closed the blinds and went back to bed. A few minutes later, the car left, and I thought it was nothing. I tried to go back to sleep. Sadly, the peace didn't last long. I suddenly woke up because I heard someone gently tapping on my window. When I opened my eyes, I saw a man crouched outside, tapping on the glass. I had a feeling it was the person from the park. To avoid freaking out, I chose to stay still and pretend to be asleep, not knowing if he could see me from outside. Suddenly, I realized something alarming. My bedroom is upstairs. This person somehow got onto my roof. I got scared and quickly covered myself with blankets. I grabbed my phone and quietly called the police. In a hushed voice, I told them what was happening. There's a guy on my roof tapping on my window. The operator told me to stay away from the window in case he tried to get in. I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and locked the door to stay safe. I waited in the bathroom for what felt like a really long time, talking to the operator on the phone. I heard someone knocking on my front door downstairs. A voice said they were the police. Just as I was about to open the bathroom door, the operator yelled at me to wait. She told me the actual police hadn't come yet and warned me not to open the door, no matter what. I suddenly realized that the person outside not only climbed onto my roof and tapped on my window, but also seemed to know I called the police. It seemed like he was trying to pretend to be a police officer to trick me into opening the door. After a while, I heard police sirens in the distance. I carefully looked out of my bedroom window and saw 3 police cars and a few officers surrounding my house. I went downstairs when a police officer knocked on the door. I thanked the person on the phone and told the whole story to the officer. They said no one was there when they came, but they found a ladder by my house. Later that night, I checked and saw that someone had messed with my bedroom window, showing that the intruder wanted to break in. In the next few days, police officers kept watch on my street, but I didn't hear anything new about what happened. It really scared me because the guy who caused trouble still hadn't been caught. And what's worse, he knew where I lived. It made me feel really vulnerable. Every little sound in the house or outside made me feel on edge, like I had to be extra careful. This scary experience made me see my home, which used to be a peaceful and safe place, as a spot filled with fear.